It's been a rough couple of weeks for Bill English. He just explained his way out of a living, expending, family entrusting tangle when a row breaks out over a not very plain TV promo for a program called Plain English. But things are looking up for Bill. Unlike Rodney Hyde, who usually dances his way lightly through the media wonderland, but he's been stumbling about in a controversy over his partner's travel costs and his throwaway lines about the Prime Minister. He won't be winning any bonus points this month for nimble footwork. And nor will Bishop and now becoming King Brian Tamaki with his claims to divinely bestowed royalty in the Old Testament model of David, supported by oaths of allegiance from followers in the model of the mafia. But Graham Henry will do better, because all he has to do to silence his critics in the twilight world of radio talkback is to win a game or two. Did they win this morning? They did. Okay, so he's won 2 in a row. So he'll be okay, because winning is believing. It's very hard to become a public figure and be heard consistently in this country. And it's even harder to stay credible and stay believable. Which is why all these politicians and sports promoters and coaches and even church leaders that I've talked about and many more spend so much money on media management and image consultancy. There's a whole science that's developed to manufacture credibility, to guarantee believability. When I was a student in the States a year or 40 ago, a naive young Kiwi newly arrived in Boston, I encountered this science of credibility building for the first time. I learned that if you had a degree from Harvard and a suit from Brooks Brothers, a button-down collared shirt, loafers with tassels, and if you drove a European car, then you could walk through almost any important doorway and find a job and a wife, even if you were a clod of a guy. Now we've taken that science, we've made it our own as New Zealanders, 10 times more sophisticated. All those public figures I talked about have media managers to help them look positive and cheerful, even though Graham Henry doesn't seem to pay much attention to his advice. But daring to be grumpy and successful is the biggest trick of all. If you follow the rules of manufacturing credibility, if you have your strategic plan in place, if your performance outcomes are ticked off, then you don't even have to smile all the time. You don't have to even ensure that your arms aren't crossed when you listen and that you're leaning forward when you speak. The rules of credible Christian communication, the rules of all communication, are actually very flexible. As the rabbis and the religious leaders of Jesus' time knew only too well, they were the masters in the art of being believable. They dressed immaculately to fulfill every detail of the law, from the length of their tassels to the cut and the curl of their beards. They waited to be greeted by those socially inferior to them, which was pretty much everybody. Their prayers flowed beautifully and endlessly, and they knew exactly where to sit in the synagogue, close to the sacred scrolls, and at the banquet tables, close to the best food. These leaders and scholars, these holy men, made our attempts to manufacture credibility look like amateur night. We can't begin to imagine how impressive they were in the first century Jewish world, how deeply respected they really were for their scholarship, for their observance of every jot and tittle of the law. You criticized them at your peril. Everyone respected them, everyone listened to them. But Jesus didn't. He called them hypocrites, and he condemned them. Even more devastating, in our gospel reading this morning, he says that God does not listen to them at all. This is a reading about how to speak and to act in a way that God will hear and respect. Not how to speak in a way that wins votes and ratings and test matches and record attendances and followers and offertories. Not how to be the voice that attracts the most attention. What is it that convinces God, that pleases, honors, gives God delight? What is it that gives glory to God? Well, Jesus answers the question by contrasting the voice of these incredibly important and respected religious leaders with the voice of a widow, which at the time was the hardest voice of all to hear. Because a widow in first century Israel was the poorest and the most vulnerable of anyone, especially if her oldest son was unmarried and she had no income at all. The Hebrew word for widow is the one who is silent, who is unable to speak. This voiceless, invisible woman, with no credibility according to the rules of the movers and shakers of the day, is the one that Jesus holds up as the model to follow. She has nothing, yet she gives it all away. She has nothing to say, yet she is heard by God more clearly than all the rest of us, all the ones who have all the words and make all the noise. She counts for nothing in the social standing of the day. She would never make the society pages of the Sunday Herald. Yet in God's eyes, she will inherit the kingdom.